In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about histology. And histology is the study of tissue, which is a group of cells functioning together and having similar structure. And in order to see the tissue, we have to have a microscope, and then we take a section of that tissue and put it on a microscope slide. This is a section of a cerebral cortex, which is the outer layer of the brain, of the cerebrum of the brain. And so let's look at the microscope first, and then we will take a look at this tissue. Okay. The parts of the microscope, you have this part, this is called the ocular lens, and then down here on a revolving thing we have a series of objective lenses that give different magnifications. So the magnification is the magnification of the ocular multiplied by the magnification of the objective lens. Okay. Then the other thing we have to know about a microscope is how to focus it. And you have a coarse adjustment, and then you have a fine adjustment down here. It's a little harder to see, but the coarse adjustment changes the focus a lot until you get close, and then the fine adjustment down here will take a little bit a more sensitive touch, brings it in more nearly into focus. Very fine adjustment, as the name implies. Okay, and then what we do with this slide, which has a section of the tissue on, usually with some kind of a stain, we put it onto the stage of the microscope. We position that. We have knobs on this microscope to position that. Then we focus first with the coarse adjustment until we get it into approximate focus, and then with the fine adjustment. It's very important to realize that histology, the study of tissue, is very important, because you could not have the organs and you could not know whether they were functioning properly without some good histology. So in the next part of this video, I'm going to show you the different kinds of tissues as seen with a microscope. Now you've seen the microscope and the microscope slide. Let's see what we can look at with that system. If we take a sample of a tissue from an organ and then look at it with a microscope, that's what we'd see. What we're seeing here is simple squamous epithelium, which is a single layer of cells, flat cells, and they're kind of like a pavement. Sometimes it's called, look like pavement stones, something. Simple squamous epithelium. There are four kinds of tissues: epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous. And so the study of this presentation is to look at the histology of epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous tissue. We start out with epithelial tissue. There's 7 different types of epithelial tissue. This is simple, that means one cell layer. Squamous means flat cells. Epithelium. So here is simple squamous epithelium as it appears on a tissue slide. Here is simple cuboidal epithelium. Cubicle-shaped cells that are in a single layer, and they're covering. So that's simple cuboidal epithelium. Here we see simple columnar epithelium, tall cells in a single layer. Here we see stratified squamous epithelium, which means flat cells in many layers. Flat cells in many layers. Now we see stratified cuboidal epithelium, which means cubicle-shaped cells in many layers. Now we see stratified columnar epithelium that are tall cells that are in many layers. Stratified columnar epithelium. Now we see pseudostratified columnar epithelium. These are tall cells, and they appear to be in multiple layers, but they're not really, because each cell is in contact with the basement membrane. This is pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Now we start into connective tissue. Connective tissue is made up of cells in a matrix. See all these dark areas, those are called chondrocytes. They're cartilaginous cells, but then they're in a matrix of collagen and various inorganic salts. So that's hyaline cartilage type of connective tissue. Here's elastic cartilage. Again, the chondrocytes are the dark cells in the spaces, and then everything else in between is matrix. Because connective tissue is made up of cells in a matrix. Here's another type of connective tissue. This is compact bone. It's arranged in the shape of targets, like bullseyes. See the concentric layers of matrix, and then the dark areas are the osteocytes, the bone cells. So again, another example of connective tissue, cells in a matrix. Here's cancellous bone. The osteocytes or osteoblast, osteoclast, all the bone cells are the little dark things, and then this big structure is called the trabeculae. Again, it's mostly matrix. Whenever you see cells that are spread out in a matrix, it's going to be connective tissue. Here's another type of connective tissue, blood. The matrix of blood is the blood plasma, the liquid part of the blood. And then we have, where you see most of the cells in here are erythrocytes, the red blood cells. And then you see two leukocytes, white blood cells. So blood is connective tissue. Cells in a matrix, spread out in the matrix. The matrix here is blood plasma. The cells are the erythrocytes, the red blood cells. And then we see here two different types of leukocytes, the white blood cells. Another kind of connective tissue is adipose tissue. I covered that up, but this is fat tissue, ADIPOSE, fat tissue. And it looks like this is all matrix here, but the cells, again, are the little dark things. So cells spread out in a matrix, that's connective tissue. Now, our third type of tissue is muscle tissue. It's contractile. It'll shorten with force when it's stimulated. And there's three types of muscle tissue: striated or skeletal muscle. This is skeletal muscle. The dark things are nuclei, and the stripes are due to the actin and the myosin protein that's in there. Okay, and this is striated muscle, and it is also voluntary. That means you can decide to make it move. Here's cardiac muscle. It's also striated. It's not as regular looking, but if you look close, you can see the striations. Okay, the nucleus. There's characterized by intercalated discs, which are like the little dark lines. There's one. They're all over the place if you look. and that's cardiac muscle. It's involuntary, but it's striated. And the third type of muscle is smooth muscle. There's no striations, and it's involuntary. It's found in the walls of blood vessels. It's found in your skin with the erector pili muscle. It's found in the walls of the digestive tract. Smooth muscle. Now we come to the last type of tissue, nervous tissue. Nervous tissue, the tissue, the cell type in the tissue that conducts the electrochemical impulse is called the neuron. Here we see a neuron. A neuron has a cell body, it has dendrites, and it has a long axon. Over here we see an actual microscope slide with a neuron, see? But you'll notice that all these little dark things, there's all kinds of cells around there, and there's about 90% plus are these glial cells or neuroglia. We'll see them on the next slide. But the one that has the action potential that conducts the message is called the neuron, and it has a cell body, it has dendrites, and then it has a axon. Now we come to the neuroglia. The neuroglia are all these little cells, all the dark things, okay? And then you can see some neurons here. There's a neuron, there's a neuron, there's a neuron, there's a neuron, there's a neuron. All the rest of them are glial cells, almost 100 times as many glial cells. And what they do is they help to support the neurons, which conduct the action potential, send the message. So now you've seen the four types of tissue cells. Let's review them. The epidermal, the epithelial cells, the epithelial cells, the connective tissue cells in a matrix, the muscular tissue, the contractile tissue, and then finally the nervous tissue. So epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous tissue.